The Constitution is just an old piece of paper. Why should I care about it?
Privacy Academy with Eric Meter.
The Constitution is being forgotten and slowly trampled on. More than that, our youth is not understanding the core reasons why it is so important to protecting our liberty. The Constitution is a love letter to liberty, a legal document designed to limit the power of the government and provide freedom and liberty for the people. The Constitution is the backbone of America that has led it to prosperity. Well, America is starting to lose its backbone, and that's because it's true. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. It's not some magical power that has protected our freedom. Rather, it is the groundwork for freedom that we, the people, must follow. Day by day, we are seeing politicians impede on our God-given rights with the excuse of greater good arguments. Well, nothing is happening to these politicians because we, the people, are not holding them accountable. And before I get into some core points of the Constitution, I want to bring up the only faults in it that both my father and I see. The Constitution does not have penalties for power seekers who disobey it. There is no accountability built into the Constitution. And for our land of prosperity, where people have grown so accustomed to having such free lives, we forget that accountability is what keeps us prosperous. In the future, if anything is added or changed in the Constitution, it should be the addition of harsh consequences of politicians who intentionally disobey the Constitution, such as the loss of the ability to run for office in any political role. With that said, I want to highlight some major points of freedom that the Constitution highlights for us. And I want to make a key point here. The Constitution highlights these freedoms. It does not grant us these freedoms. Our freedoms do not come from the state. They come from God. The Constitution exists to prevent power seekers from attempting to remove our God-given rights. First off, I want to highlight one of the most important parts of the Constitution. And instead of doing the obvious, I'm going to throw you a curveball. I'm going to start this video off by talking about the 10th Amendment. In many ways, the 10th Amendment is one of the most powerful amendments in protecting our individual God-given liberties. The 10th Amendment states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." So what does this mean? This means that the federal government has no powers outside of what it is granted to it in the Constitution. In other words, the Constitution is designed to protect a decentralized and free America, one against centralized power at a top level. Unfortunately, this has fell to the wayside, and it is the fault of weak governors refusing to use their 10th Amendment powers to their full capacity. Anything not outlined in the Constitution can be challenged by the state. The 10th Amendment is extremely underrated and needs to be talked about more. We need strong governors to rise up and set the standard for other states. By ensuring state-level systems, we guarantee the ability to cause real change on a local level and hold politicians accountable. Now let's go back to some of the more popular amendments. Obviously, the First Amendment, being the first for a reason. The power of freedom of speech is one of the most powerful tools in the world. Truth is ultimate, and it unravels all lies of power seekers. Truth is the biggest fear of liars, manipulators, and cheats. That's why freedom of speech is so powerful. It's also why we're seeing such a massive attack on freedom of speech globally. Unfortunately, we're seeing members of both parties have this take. Like Pam Bondi exclaiming that hate speech should be illegal, same with Hillary Clinton. Freedom of speech is the backbone of freedom at all. Information is what allows us to shape our reality and make our decisions. Without freedom of information, our reality is constantly subject to distortion from those who control information. Before freedom of speech existed, there were the Dark Ages. And what allowed people to get out of the Dark Ages was the scientific method, or in other words, the ability to freely question belief. There will be countless arguments against freedom of speech, but whatever the cost, truth must prevail. Truth requires freedom of speech, and freedom of speech requires something else to work. That is the Fourth Amendment, which states, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized." In other words, the Fourth Amendment is the right to privacy. Without privacy, there can be no freedom of speech. Why? Because if you cannot speak anonymously, power seekers will kill you for it. I mean, just look at all the whistleblowers who have committed suicide or have had to flee the country in fear of their lives. But the Fourth Amendment is under attack more than any other amendment, and in many ways, the Fourth Amendment has been completely trampled on. They haven't even tried to repeal it. They just quite literally spy on everyone without care of the Constitution. This should be very alarming for people. They've come up with some very tricky ways to do this. First off, they do this through private-public partnerships. In other words, they have formed wings of the government that are private businesses. For example, Google received NSA funding at its inception with the purpose of surveillance in mind. This can be said for most big tech companies. It's no exaggeration when you say big tech is Big Brother. There may be a legal difference, but at the end of the day, they are working together both to spy on you and to spit on the Fourth Amendment. The government has also blatantly disobeyed the Fourth Amendment in many different ways. First of all, through the Patriot Act, which keeps expanding. And now more recently, through partnerships with businesses like Palantir to centralize all government data points and tie it together in one place, or in other words, to create a digital ID. The government wants as much information on you as possible because they know that they can manipulate you, predict you, punish you, and control you with this information. So much so that data is becoming the most valuable commodity in the world. With a complete surveillance state, they will have complete control over the masses. This is what the Fourth Amendment was designed to stop, even though our founding fathers could have never imagined the future terrors of modern technology. There's one more amendment I want to talk about, and arguably this is the most debated amendment, the Second Amendment. Guns. The Second Amendment was designed to allow the average person to have something that allows them to protect their land and their family from someone else who could have a gun as well. And many people bring up mass shootings and gun deaths when talking about the Second Amendment. And it's funny because those conversations never occurred during the mass terrorism attacks in Europe that happened through knife, bomb, car, or acid. They're also never talked about when people in countries with firm gun laws get shot up. And they never talk about the fact that mass killings and violence are a growing trend. If you look at events like Columbine, you can see the trend start to form towards mass violence. This is not a marker of guns. This is a marker of a culture of mass shootings that have radically grown since this event. So why is that the case when guns have always been allowed in America? It's not the guns, but rather the people. Ultimately, the radicalization is happening through social media and other tech devices, especially platforms that promote gore and desensitize the youth. Guns are the reason that American politicians tread lightly. There is a reason that the UK has been the forefront of pushing globalist radical policies. Guns are what protect our rights, whether you like it or not. If politicians do not fear the people will fear the politicians. And I am in no way condoning political violence with this. I believe in peace and change through thought. But we live in a world where the threat of violence always exists, and we have to defend ourselves. If anything, America is reaching a boiling point, and people are starting to feel real trigger happy. Now more than ever, we need discussion and to build bridges. We cannot keep pushing this division until it's too late. So what's the solution to this? How do we go back and relieve the tension instead of adding to this friction? Well, first of all, we need to all take a moment to reflect on our Constitution and the roadmap that it has left for us. We have to hold politicians accountable, and also we the people have to run for office. The average person doesn't want political power, and funnily enough, that is exactly the kind of person that you want to have in office. We cannot outsource our fight and rely solely on political saviors. We need to rebuild local communities, local trade, and find strong governors who will use the 10th Amendment to its full power. For the people who say we can leave and be anarchists, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't believe that will work. The Constitution is designed to limit the power of the government. If we're all in small communes without some form of unity to restrict power, a much larger dictatorship will come through and wipe out all of the small communes. We need to come together and unite as people, build bridges even with your enemies, and restore the America that existed before. One big aspect of this is getting away from modern technology and back into the real world. One of the biggest ways you can get private and escape the coming surveillance state is through digital minimalism. It is not the only way, but it is very powerful. The surveillance state is the biggest threat to our liberty, and it is the reason why we're seeing such radicalization over the last 20 years. If you're interested in escaping the surveillance state and creating a legacy of freedom for our future generations, then I recommend clicking the link below. It's an invitation to our class on 5 steps that you can take today to get out of the surveillance state. Thank you.